Hey there everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a dungeon master that essentially takes all player agency away from a player at the final session of a campaign. A story about a Murderhobo player that wants to play an anthropomorphic duck for really strange reasons, and much more. But before we get into those, Nipsey would like to have a word.
You should like, comment, and subscribe. I really like this block.
I couldn't agree more, Nipsey. But with that said, let's get into some DnD horror stories. Dungeon Master has player end campaign with unforeshadowed betrayal by Reddit user Tabletop Tomb. So there I was, about to take my seat for what was supposed to be the dramatic final showdown of our year-long campaign. The Dungeon Master leans in with a devilish grin and says, "As you step forward to claim the Crystal of Eternia, your trusted companion, Merrick, stabs you in the back, claiming the crystal's power for himself. Game over." Yeah, you heard that right. Game over. There was no epic battle, no last-minute saves, just a little bit of dialogue, a bit of betrayal, with a side of getting on with it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me explain how we got to this train wreck of a session. For the past year, our group had been meeting every other Saturday. We'd gone from exploring haunted forests to battling the denizens of the far realm. We'd defeated Lich Kings and Black Dragons. In short, our characters had gone from mere adventurers to legends. Our group was hyped to start our last session. Little did we know, this session would be a year's worth of excitement, crushed beneath the heel of the most nonsensical plot twist of all time. Merrick had been with us since session 0, our rogue, played by our buddy Dave. Merrick was the resident comic relief. He'd snark at the DM, trade quips with the Dwarven Barbarian, and occasionally prank the stuck-up Elven Ranger. He was bloody trustworthy, both the character and the player, so when the DM says, "As you step forward to claim the Crystal of Eternia, your trusted companion, Merrick, stabs you in the back, claiming the crystal's power for himself, game over." It wasn't just Dick Carabas's character being stabbed in the back. It felt personal. The room went pin-drop silent. Every eye went to Dave, fully expecting him to say, "You're kidding, right?" But Dave just shrugged, looking as shocked as the rest of us. Turns out that the Dungeon Master had pulled Dave aside before the session to tell him about the quote twist, which left him with very little option but to play along. Now, I've got no problem with plot twists, moments of high drama, or, occasionally, a character death. However, this was cheap. This was unearned. There hadn't been months of planning. There hadn't even been a session's worth of sketchy behavior on the part of Merrick. There was no sudden, but inevitable, betrayal. Just the abrupt, cold end to a story that we all had a piece of. What made it worse was that he looked like the DM had just pulled the mother of all aces from his sleeve. We were at a loss. The session limped to a close with half-hearted, quote, "see you arounds," and awkward looks. We spent the next few days in the group chat railing against the injustice. We debated starting a new campaign with our characters' descendants. Heck, we even thought about asking the Dungeon Master not to come back. The magic was gone. The final session had rendered an amazing year's worth of stories into a cautionary tale about the importance of collaborative storytelling and the player's stake in the story. Looking back, I think that's why this is a horror story. It wasn't in-game monsters or deadly traps. It was the reminder that in tabletop RPGs, the scariest story is one where a bad move by the Dungeon Master turns an epic saga into a tragedy. Not just for the characters, but for the players too. TLDR, In the final session of our year-long RPG campaign, the Dungeon Master abruptly ended the game by having a trusted character betray the party with no prior hints or foreshadowing, ruining the immersive and collaborative storytelling experience, and leaving the players frustrated and disillusioned. Dang, talk about an anticlimactic conclusion to all of that time spent playing that campaign. I would be a bit peeved as well, especially if I was the player playing Malik, as the Dungeon Master essentially took all player agency away, and basically turned his character into an NPC Deus Ex Machina as a way to just bring the game to an abrupt end. It makes me wonder if the Dungeon Master just didn't know how to close out a campaign in a way that would be satisfying, and got sort of stunlocked, and did the first thing that came to mind. Or he could have just thought that it would be funny to end it abruptly that way. I know if I was one of the players, I would have said something to the Dungeon Master about how that is a bunch of BS right after it happened, and let him know how crappy of a way that was to end a year's worth of playing. Hopefully, OP and the other players do start up a new campaign, and if they do decide to invite that Dungeon Master, just make sure that he's nowhere near behind the DM screen. Let's move on. Quote, Duckman homebrew aarakocra turns D&D into a, quote, grape simulator. By Reddit user KneeIcy837. This happened about a year ago. There was a game shop in the city I live near, so I checked it out, got to know the store's unofficial Forever DM, and soon got to play in his new campaign. Our characters included me, a human fighter, a drow paladin, a dwarf cleric, a kobold warlock, and that guy, an aarakocra rogue named Duckman. His aarakocra was homebrewed to be like an anthropomorphic duck, so he wanted his aarakocra to fly less efficiently in exchange for upgraded swimming abilities. He also declared that geese were his #1 enemy, and that he will murder any goose or goose sympathizer he encounters. After session 0, we wake up in a dungeon and have to escape. We do so and flee to an inn on the side of the road to evade the enemy armies. Once we get inside, Duckman starts hitting on the innkeeper after she shows us our rooms, but she refuses because she is getting married. He says, "I don't see him," but she again refuses. So he says, "You ain't going nowhere," and then said, "I shut the door and grab her and throw the bitch on the bed. I cover her mouth so she can't scream, as I say, 'Get ready to eat some bird dick,' and..." The Dungeon Master then nervously interrupts him and said, "Before you have a chance to do any of that, she uses her psionic powers to grab you as you intuitively sense the illithid presence within her, as she paralyzes you for the night and disappears without a trace." Duckman then says, "Really? A mind flayer Deus Ex Machina? All for some random innkeeper bitch?" Dungeon Master then nervously says, "I'm sorry, I really should have said this in session 0. But I don't think scenes like that are appropriate for this campaign. We can go dark, but not that dark." Duckman then starts getting mad and says, "Well, then how the hell is he supposed to get laid?" The Dungeon Master then said, "Only if the other character consents." Now Duckman is getting irate and says, "This is literally just how ducks are. Look up why female duck pussies are corkscrewed. Ducks ain't woke. Male ducks take what they want, and Duckman is no different. I based my entire character off this concept, and you are ruining it." After that comment, Drow Paladin steps in and says, "You don't have to be a woke type to oppose SA, you absolute clown." Duckman then said, "Whatever, I'm leaving. You all ruined hours of character creation for me." And he left and blocked all of us on social media as if any of us cared. He never returned to the game shop either, so we never saw him again. Well, quote, "Ducks ain't woke" isn't something I ever expected to read in a sentence. Now, the concept of a duck homebrew, aarakocra, that has a grudge against geese could be a bit comical for a character. Though the fact that this player said that he built this character around the actual sexual habits of ducks, and by not allowing what he wanted to do, was ruining his character, has got to make you wonder what the heck the inside of this dude's brain is like. I would say that him leaving after throwing a fit, due to the dungeon master not allowing it, is no big loss, and that at least the player showed his true colors right at the beginning of the campaign. That way, the rest of the group didn't have to deal with him for long. Let's move on. Dungeon Master reveals my character's secret and starts taking over them as well. By Reddit user AddPuzzleheaded2113. I joined a new group that was about to start. The Dungeon Master describes the world as a continent that has no humans and will basically kill any human who sets foot on it. I asked the DM if I could make a human that was shipwrecked and saw 2 of the survivors being brutally killed. She would always wear masks and cover everything at all times for her safety until she could escape. The Dungeon Master loved the idea and enthusiastically agreed. We went through a couple of sessions, with the other players loving that they couldn't find out why I was so secretive about my looks. I ended up missing one session, and came back to my character's secret being outed by a god and given protection from being discriminated against. The players didn't really like it, because we weren't able to bond over it. I asked the Dungeon Master why they would do that. They said that they thought that I was having issues with playing my character, so they took away the issue. I told them that it was my character's whole reason for why they were with the party, so he told me that the god demanded that I stay with them, or his protection would disappear. The Dungeon Master then started to tell me how my character would do certain things, now that they were free. He basically handed me a whole new character to play with, even with a different class. I was originally a rogue thief. When I asked why I was being turned into a cleric, they told me that my character was so thankful to the god that they became their cleric. I didn't even know how to play a cleric. I left after the only thing that I could do was roll dice, because the Dungeon Master would tell me what to do because of my lack of knowledge. A party member later reached out to me after I had left and told me that the Dungeon Master took over my character for the rest of the campaign. Yeah, that certainly was a messed up thing for that Dungeon Master to do, and his excuse of doing it to help out OP come out as a player is BS. I took that as OP playing the character as a bit shy and reserved due to being a human in an area where humans are killed, and that perhaps the Dungeon Master saw that as the player being shy or something. But to go as far as to change the class as well? I don't blame OP for leaving after that. Hopefully, OP has since found another game to play in, with a better Dungeon Master. Let's move on. Dick Player by Reddit user Peace222. Hey y'all, so I'm on my second campaign with this same group of friends. All have more experience than me. But there's this one player that's seriously becoming a major pain in the ass. He's moody, backstabs the group for fun, stacks a bunch of cheats on his hits. The Dungeon Master this time isn't having it, thankfully. And in general, overrides the entire campaign, from, quote, disagreeing with the rules at his own whim, then bitching until he's sated, or threatens to leave, or just does, to overtaking anyone who tries to have their own dialogue encounters. There's a few reasons I've just been eating crap from him, and it's because, 1. It's my second campaign. I'm still learning, and am aware that I already ask a bunch of questions, which our Dungeon Master is patient with, and very kind about, but I still try to limit them. And 2. The Dick Player, the DM, and the previous DM, who catered to said player, have all been friends much longer than I have been with any of them. and got used to his crap. He's a rogue, though earlier this campaign, he was a monk who was actually balanced, but found it too boring, and brought back a character from the first campaign we played, who's a chaotic F-head. He literally had tried to kill his party members in their sleep because it was, quote, quirky, and has a tantrum if he isn't in control of everything or the center of attention at all time. Being a new player and aware of the fact, I asked 2 of my buddies after the games what I can improve on, and they have been more than helpful in aiding my growth as a player, though all of them have explicitly acknowledged their frustration with this guy, though there's nothing they can really do since it's just how he is, and it would fray their friendship to check him at the table. Apparently, Rogue Boy is preparing some effed up, tantrumy, childish, party-damaging behavior for next Sunday, and I just can't effing wait to see what the hell it's gonna be now. Any advice? I get along well with everybody else, to the point that I can stomach this dude, but everyone is constantly playing peacemaker with this guy, and it's getting worse. It sounds like this player is really throwing a wrench into the enjoyment of not only OP, but the other players as well, even if they don't want to confront him on it. Rogue sounds like your typical that guy murder hobo with a big case of main character syndrome. I can understand being a tad apprehensive about bringing up how this player is ruining the enjoyment of the game for OP, as he stated that he is the newest member. But nothing will change unless someone says something about it. My advice would be to talk to the other players and DM about it, and possibly see if y'all can have a sit down with the rogue player and tell him why his actions are kind of souring the game for everyone. With any luck, he would be receptive, and maybe tone down the murder hobo behavior just a bit. Otherwise, if OP is not enjoying the game and nothing can be done, there's always the old adage of no D&D is better than bad D&D. Hopefully, things can get ironed out, and OP and the rest of the players can enjoy the game more. Let's move on. Weirdest Way to Find an RPG Group by Reddit user Topher Kirsting. When I moved to Chattanooga, I had stopped running a moderately long campaign, 3 years, in Orlando, so I wanted to get a new game going here. I posted a flyer in my local game store looking for players, but nothing. Eventually, I asked the store owner who was running games in the area. He told me that there was a game in the store on Sunday afternoons, and that I should talk to Dave, the GM, about joining. That Sunday, I show up and ask Dave if he has any open spots. He apologized, saying that he already has 7 players. I had no local friends and nothing better to do, so I asked if I could watch him run, as long as I kept quiet. He agreed, so I pulled up a chair. Dave was running a pretty good game, with the players having a good time, when this guy came into the store and started yelling at one of the players. The player apologized for the disturbance and excused himself to have this discussion outside. Then there was a crash. As the player approached the glass front door, the yelling guy pushed him through it. One of the other players was a police officer, so he called for the police and an ambulance. Eventually, the player went off in the ambulance to get stitched up, and the other guy got hauled off in handcuffs. Everyone else slowly returned to the table. The game master then said, "So, Topher, can you play a cleric?" 20 years later, and I'm still playing and game mastering with Dave and 2 other players from that group, plus a few others we've added over the years. Anyone else have a weird player intro story? Well, that certainly is a way to get invited to a new D&D group. Though, I wonder what that one player and the guy yelling at him were arguing about, in order for one of them to end up going through a glass door. It's also a bit lucky for OP to be there when it happened, but not quite as lucky for the other 2, with one going to the hospital and the other one to jail. But hey, at least OP found a group that he's been playing with for 20 years now. And I'll reiterate OP's question. Have any of you had a weird intro into a D&D group? Be sure to let us know in the comments. Let's move on. Player hasn't done anything in over a month. By Reddit user, Last Wish of Cade 6. It's my first time being the Dungeon Master here, so please bear with my possible stupidity in an otherwise obvious situation. About 1 month ago, February 17th, I had given my players access to the story's backstory and their character sheets. Now, I know most of them are still humans and get busy over time, so I made it obvious that I did not expect them to finish everything in less than a week or something. By now, 2 players have finished essentially everything, and only one hasn't fully finished their backstory and visual design. The 4th player, though, has not even started their character at all. Not even an idea of a class or a race. About a week ago, I asked him what was wrong, and he said that he would start it soon, which he still has not done by now. So by now, it has been almost a month that he could have worked on it, to no avail. I understand that he might be very busy or something, but am I wrong to assume that he doesn't care about the campaign or the other players, if even when he has free time, he plays video games rather than working on it? I think I've decided to probably kick him today. Is this reasonable to do? TLDR. Player has not done anything for his character in over a month. The rest of the players are finished. What to do? Honestly, I wouldn't kick him just yet. I would set a deadline at this point for a start date and tell him that if he doesn't have a character ready by then, that you're going to start the game with the other players. And if he still wants to play afterwards, you could always add him in later. Trust me, as someone who tends to procrastinate myself, which reminds me, I gotta do my taxes. Sometimes a deadline is all it takes to light a fire under someone's butt in order to get something done. Perhaps knowing that there's a deadline to start the game, he'll get it done in time. Though, what would you all suggest OP do in this situation? But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.